Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our next session for SeaWeek. Very excited to be coming to you today with our next presenter from Sydney Olympic Park. So SeaWeek is a great celebration to learn more about our coast and marine environments and thinking about how we care for those as well. So this week we've got a whole series of virtual excursions coming to you from presenters from across Australia. So we'll head straight over to Sydney Olympic Park and we'll have a conversation with Aunty Kim.
Hello, everybody. I'm here at Sydney Olympic Park, and as you can see, it doesn't look much like the Olympic Park. Where I'm at is the green space of Sydney Olympic Park. This is a mangrove forest, okay? And because we're celebrating SeaWeek this week, I thought this would be a wonderful place to talk about that and to talk about how Aboriginal people see the sea and waterways. And so what an idyllic place this is. So this is called the Badu mangroves, and it's an intertidal wetlands. And this mangrove forest here, there's some trees in here that are over 100 years old. And this forest has been here for a very, very long time. And being intertidal, that means the tide comes in and out. So it is affected by the sea. And these mangroves need that to grow. So we are on Wongal country. Sydney Olympic Park is built on Wongal country. They are the traditional custodians and the First Nations peoples of this place. So it's really important that we acknowledge the Wongal. So I'd like to respectfully acknowledge Wongal, the elders of past, present and future generations emerging. Elders in our culture are really, really important because they are the knowledge keepers and they are the holders of our dreaming stories. They're incredibly important to us and our culture. I'd also like to acknowledge the ancient ones, the ancestors, the men and women who first walked on this land in the beginning. We believe that their spirit still walks this place today amongst the mangroves, and their spirit will be here to the end of time. Now, Wongal have a connection to the land, they have a connection to the waterways, and they have a connection to the skies. Wongal country runs a very long way up Parramatta River. So it runs right up to a place called Goat Island, which is in Sydney, Sydney Harbour. And then Sydney Harbour goes into the Pacific Ocean. So essentially, Wongal do have a place in this SeaWeek because the sea brings in animals, brings in water, and it feeds their country, okay, with everything that they need. My name is Kim, and I'm a Joondaburri saltwater woman from Yidden. So Yidden is the traditional name of my home. It's also known as Bribie Island, and it's located in southeast Queensland. I like to say Yidden. I always call it Yidden because that's the name my ancestors gave my island. Okay, so I grew up on country. I was very, very fortunate, and hence me being a saltwater woman. So I have an affinity to the sea. The sea is very important to me. It has meaning to us as Aboriginal people that live by the water and by the ocean. We believe it's a living entity and we have connections to that. So we also have connections to land, but we have connections to the sea, and we take care of the sea. From my country, we have dolphin as our totem. Now, dolphin is like, when I say totem, dolphin is family. Okay, so my ancestors used to hunt with dolphin in around Bribie Island. So the men would go out with their spears and spear fish, and the dolphins would bring the fish in for the men to spear. So they would herd up the fish and bring them in. These are stories that have passed down from generation to generation on my country. So dolphin is part of our family because we live with them in the ocean, like around the ocean, and they are part of us, and they hunt with our fellows, with my ancestors. Now, I was fortunate enough to grow up on country. I was very young, and I remember very much a lot of the things that I did. I always had an understanding and a love of the ocean and the sea. I remember when I was little, my dad used to take us on a boat around Bribie Island, and I used to sit on the bow of the boat with my feet dangling over, and I could see everything in the ocean and everything in the sea. And the dolphins used to come along the bow, and I'd have my feet dangling down there, and they would be swimming alongside of us. So all our family were with us. So I also knew the workings of the ocean. I knew the tides at a very, very early age. My mum, I used to go out on my own swimming in the ocean, like in the waterways. And my mum would say, okay, when the tide goes out, you've got to come home. So I knew the tides very, very well. And then sometimes when the tides would go out, you'd have this exposed sandbanks. And we have these little crabs called soldier crabs. And I used to chase them around when I was little. So I've grown up around the sea and appreciating the sea, appreciating all that kind of environment. And it's very important to me as a saltwater woman. And I'm privileged to be able to share all this with you because, it's one thing to say, look after our oceans. But the thing is, we believe our oceans are living. So, of course, we want to have that clean. We want to have it looked after by everybody. Now, the people here in Sydney, the Aboriginal people here in Sydney, they have a flower. There's a flower here called the Sydney golden wattle. When that golden wattle is in bloom, that means that the whales, the humpback whales, are migrating from Antarctica up to the Coral Sea. Now, the whales that actually do that are the females, and the females that are actually having are pregnant with babies. So they don't give birth in Antarctica. The whales give birth up in the Coral Sea where it's warmer and safer and the conditions are a lot better so that their calf can have a good start in life. Okay. So Liana's got some photos of a whale there with her calf. Okay, so what the women do is they go to the edge of the escarpments that overlook the water. This is in Sydney. That overlook the water, and I believe down the south coast do this as well. And it's called whale dreaming. And the women sing to the whales as they migrate up to the warmer oceans in the Coral Sea to give birth. And those songs are saying to the whales to have a safe journey and to give birth in a safe way, in a safe condition, and for your babies to be healthy. And that's what the women do every year. So this is a tradition that the Sydney Aboriginal people had all those years ago, and it's called whale dreaming. And the women call the dreaming song whale dreaming song, so that they would look after the calves, and so the mothers will look after the calves and bring them back safely. Okay. Now, there's one fascinating thing is that when the whales, the humpback whales, are really good mums, and so the babies can't quite work out how to get the air. So, because whales breathe air, they don't breathe in the water. So, what happens is in the photo you can see there, where the mother whale is underneath the baby whale. Okay, and it's holding up the baby whale. Okay, so the baby will know to go to the surface to breathe in the air. And she'll always make sure that the baby whale is above her for that reason. So the baby whale learns to breathe. Yeah. So they're very, very good mothers. They take care of their young very, very well. So that's a really good a good thing about Aboriginal people here in Sydney, that they wish these whales well and sing them the dreaming stories as they travel through. Now, another thing here at the Wongal, in Wongal country, is that they have eels that come along here. Now, eels come up Parramatta River. So even though it's intertidal, okay, eels still come up here. And these eels are called short-fin eels. And they're quite amazing animals because they can live in saltwater and freshwater. So they can even crawl across the land. So they're really, really amazing, these guys. Now, the short-fin eel is Parramatta River is named after them. Okay, so the proper word for that is Bada. Bada means place of the swimming eel or where the eels swim in language. But the early colonists couldn't say Bada, so they made Parramatta. So that's where Parramatta River got its name. But the eels are very, very interesting, the short-finned eels. They have an interesting life. So they not only live here in Sydney and in the river systems here in Sydney, they also live in New Zealand. They're also found in islands in the Pacific, like Fiji, okay? And they go right down the coast, right down to Tasmania in Australia. And then what happens is when it's time for them to spawn, that means find a partner and have babies, they all have to migrate to the Coral Sea. And the Coral Sea is where the humpbacks go. So Coral Sea is really important, yeah? So Coral Sea is an important place for the humpbacks to give birth. And it's also an important place for the eels to spawn and have babies. Now, the thing is with the eels, they live to be about 35 years old. That's really long life, isn't it? But, there is a but. They only spawn once in their life. They only have babies once in their life. So when they actually go and migrate to the Coral Sea, they have their babies and then they go off and die, which is really sad. But they have up to 3 million eggs. Okay, so the females have up to 3 million eggs, so they can have 3 million babies. That's phenomenal. So when their babies are hatched up in the Coral Sea, believe it or not, all of those babies, wherever their parents come from, will go back to that place to live their life. And it's funny how instinct is so amazing in animal life. So the eels that came from here that went up to the Coral Sea to give birth, their babies will come back here. And it takes about 1 to 3 years for them to get back. In that time, these little babies are like glass, they're clear. And that's a form of protection. So I think you know what that word is. That word starts with a C. It's camouflage. So to camouflage themselves, traveling back to their place of origin where their parents came from, these eels will not change colour until they're back in the river system where their parents came from. So they will stay clear. And the ones that come here will follow the eastern current. So who's seen Finding Nemo? So you see in Finding Nemo how they caught this eastern current that goes along the eastern side of Australia. That current just runs straight along the coastline of eastern coastline of Australia. Well, these little eels, they catch that too. So they come along on that current, and then they pull out when it's time for them to find their place, yeah? And then they find their home where their parents came from. So I think that's absolutely fantastic that such a creature could do all that, yeah? And then they won't change colour until they come into their system here up Parramatta River. And then they'll change their colour from transparent into the brown. So I find that really quite fascinating. Now, the eels were most definitely on the menu for the Aboriginal people here. There were times that they didn't catch eels, so that's part of Aboriginal sustainability. So they would have seasons where they would catch eels and have them on the menu. Now, there's Yeah. Thank you. Liana's just going to give me, thank you. That's Liana, everyone. My partner in crime. So this is what we call an eel trap. Looks a bit like a hat, doesn't it? But it's not. So it's made from grasses, okay? So what the Aboriginal people do, okay, had a boo-boo. Technology. So, so this is made from the grasses. Now, the woman who made this, her name is Sue Price, and she's an Aboriginal woman who used to work here, and she kindly made this and donated it to Sydney Olympic Park for us to show how the Wongal people caught their eels. Yeah. So the eel trap is made from grasses. It's woven, and the bottom is smaller than the top. Yeah. And there's a big hollow that goes in there. So what the Aboriginal people did was they put of this place, they put food on the in the bottom, in the inside, okay, for the eel, and they would put it amongst the mangroves. They would attach it, like wedge it in amongst the mangrove roots and branches and trunks and all that kind of stuff to secure it. When the tide comes in, because remember I said this is intertidal, when the tide comes in, particularly if it's a really high tide, eels definitely come in with the tide because they're going to come along here and get all the little fish, and they find it's really good pickings in here. So what will happen is when the tide comes in and the eels come in, they're going to say, yay, there's a bit of food for free. So they're going to swim in here. But guess what? The big eels cannot swim backwards. The little eels can turn around and go out. Well, you don't want to eat little eels. That's not sustainable. But the big eels, they're the ones that we're after. So the big eels can grow to 1 meter plus, okay, long. So when they swim in here, okay, because this is nearly 1 meter, okay, when they swim in here, they get stuck because they can't swim backwards. So they're inside, and then when the tide goes out, the Wongal will come and grab all the traps that they've laid out, and eel was most definitely on the menu. So I don't know, I've never tried eel, but a lot of people have. Yeah, oh, Liana has, there you go. So it was, it's a delicacy, I think, these days. But the Wongal ate eel frequently. As I said, there were certain times of the year where they didn't, and that's how Aboriginal people live sustainably. There's certain times of the year that they wouldn't take oysters, because oysters were definitely on the menu, and mussels, they have mussels as well. But there were certain times of the year they wouldn't take them. And that was to make sure that they would be reproducing. Yeah. So that's the sustainability of our culture, which is really quite amazing. So this little chap was fantastic. It might not last very long because it's only made of grasses, but it worked a treat. Now, Sue, when she made this, it would have taken her quite a while, because to hand make this, I've made baskets, and the baskets can take me up to 2 days. I'm sure that this would have taken her at least 2 days, even more, probably 3 or 4 days, to make this with such intricacy. So and to make it very authentic. So yeah, this is a priceless treasure that we have here in Sydney Olympic Park that was donated by a very special lady. Okay, so with weaving, okay, weaving was really, have the milk on? Yeah. So weaving is really important for many things. One of the things that Aboriginal women used weaving for was to make fishing line. Yeah. So thank you, Liana. So fishing line. So this is a fishing line. I made this a long time ago, so it's sort of a bit worse for wear. But this is where I've used grasses and twined the line, okay, twisted the line. And this is the traditional method of making fishing line, okay. This is what my ancestors would have used, and most definitely what the ancestors used here what the people used here to go fishing. It's called a malgun. Now, the malgun is the name of this in language of Sydney. Unfortunately, I've lost my language, so I don't know what we called it, but we did most definitely use this to go fishing. Now, the reason why women used fishing line was because we weren't allowed to use hunting spears or any hunting tools. Only the men could use them, and we weren't allowed to touch them, let alone use them. So we made our own, and we made fishing line. And this stem that the line is wound around, this is a Gymea lily stem. Now, I don't know if you know what a Gymea lily looks like. It's really, the flower has a really long stem, and up the top there's a lily that opens up, a red lily. And then after that lily dies, the stem dies. And then what happens is that the Aboriginal women will go and cut the stem down and wrap their malgun line, their fishing line, around the stem. And it's really cool because this is so light and buoyant. So if you're going to drop it in the water, you can easily fish it out. You can easily get it because it's going to float. Yeah. Now the malgun women, that's the fisher women here. Okay, bring some shells. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I'm getting louder to do all my little bring up the little bits and pieces. Thank you. So the Malgun women, okay, made the fishing line, and they also made the hooks to go with it. And the hooks were made out of shell, okay? So there's different kinds of shell you can use. Here, oysters were quite abundant. So oyster shells were used, thank you, to make fishing hooks out of to attach to the line. Also, abalone shells were used. Now, abalone, if they could get abalone, that was absolutely fantastic because abalone shells are really beautiful. They're very shiny. And what the fisherwomen used to do, they used to shine up the abalone shells after they made their hook, and then that would attract the fish because it's all shiny in the water. The fisherwomen here of Sydney were phenomenal fishers. They would go out in their nawi, which is a canoe, into Birrabirra and the waterways. Birrabirra is the the name for Sydney Harbour. They were going to Birrabirra in their nawi and fish with their malgun, and they were always successful. Every single day, the fisherwomen would go out and do their fishing. Okay, and they would always bring back fish to feed the communities and their families. They were amazing, and they would go out every day. Heat like today, rain, wind, storm, freezing cold, they would go out every day and fish. Okay, and the early settlers, some of the early settlers wrote journals, and some of those journals we've had privy to, and they were saying about how amazing the women were here, that they would just go out and do this fishing in no matter what weather in these Maui, and they would always come back successful. So they were absolutely fantastic fisherwomen, and I believe that in my country, the women were good fisherwomen as well. But in my country, we have lots of shell middens. So that's places where my ancestors sat and ate, especially oysters. Yeah. So we have lots of areas on Bribie Island and on Yidden where there's shell middens, and on the foreshores as well, because at one point Bribie Island was connected to the mainland, that's like thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and now it's separated. So my ancestors also connected to the foreshores of Bribie Island or Yidden. So they most definitely ate oysters, and there's so many midden sites on the foreshores and on Yidden Island to support that, which is really fantastic. So the ocean for us as Aboriginal people, any Aboriginal person that lives by the ocean, okay, needs the ocean, and we have to thank the ocean for that. And by thanking the ocean, we take care of it. And as Karen was saying, taking care of our oceans, taking care of our seas is so, so important because it is a living entity and it supports so much life. There's so many fishes and different kinds of life in the ocean. Okay, our whales, our dolphins, my family live in there. So we need to take care of our seas and our oceans and our waterways. And one thing that you can do is whenever you visit the beach, you make sure that whatever you took, you take home with you. Because whatever you leave behind on the sand inevitably ends up in the water. And that affects everything that lives in the water. So it might be a small thing, but if everybody did that, we would have beautiful, pristine waterways and a beautiful, pristine ocean and sea. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Is there any questions? Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask me? You could put it in the Q&A. How long have I got, Liana? Oh, I've got 20 minutes left. Oh my goodness, I've got all this time left. That's amazing. Usually I don't have a lot of time. So if there are any questions that anyone has that would like to ask me about what I just talked about. I really do. Eels have a sense of smell? And I would like to say, yes, they do. They can smell the food. So in the eel trap, so food would be in there and they will probably smell it. The food they might use would be either some fish leftover, fish carcass, or oysters, or something to that effect that they will leave in the eel trap. So they will most definitely be able to smell it to know that it's there. Yeah. Any other questions? No other questions. Well, what I'm going to do, so because I've spent all, yeah, one more question? From Wilson's Creek Public School, yes. How old were you when you learned about the tides? Oh, how old was I? That's a really good question. I was very, yeah. How old was I when I learnt about the tides? I was about 2 or 3. I was very, very young. And it's funny because I remember things like that. So a lot of people don't remember when they were that age, but I remember playing in the on the shoreline and playing in the water and chasing the soldier crabs. And I remember when the tide started going out, I knew exactly when it was going out. I was about 2 or 3, yeah. And then I'd have to either come inside or just play on the sand and chase the soldier crabs. No, eels are not poisonous. We eat them. So they're not poisonous and they're not electric eels. We don't have electric eels here in Australia. So these are called short-finned eels. And like I said, their life is amazing. They're quite amazing eel. They're quite an amazing fish. Yeah. So. Where did you get the things that you showed us? Okay, so the things, rightio. So I made this. I made that from grasses. So if Liana, would you like to show the lamandra? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you for a little walk. Okay. Okay, so this is the grasses called lamandra. These grasses here. These grasses are lamandra. This is what we use for weaving. Now, Sue's eel trap was made from a different grass because these lamandra grasses are really tough. So the grasses that she used are a little bit different, but I most definitely made this, okay, out of those grasses. And what you do is to prepare this. I know it doesn't look like much, does it? Looks very different. So what you do is that you harvest the grasses. So I mean, it's quite lengthy. You harvest these long stems and you let them dry for about 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes maybe 5 weeks. And then what you do after you've let them dry, then you wet them again. And when you wet them again, they're really flexible, makes them like easy to weave with. Yeah. So you have a very short period of time to be able to weave with them, because if you keep them wet at that point for a long time, they go moldy and then you can't use them anymore. So that's how we do that. So there is a process, and these processes are handed down from generation to generation to generation. So my ancestors, like, 30,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, passed this technique down from generation to generation. And the thing is, as Aboriginal people, a lot of this information we have inside, we already know this, it's in our DNA. And then what you need to do is just tease it out. And that's where our elders, our knowledge keepers, help tease out that information, that knowledge that we're born with. So I was fortunate enough to meet an auntie who showed me how to make this and how to weave baskets. And within a day, I just knew how to do it. And it's funny how that happens. It's just part of who we are as Aboriginal people, that this knowledge is already in us, inside us. And the knowledge of looking after country, and the knowledge in particular, like of the oceans, of the seas, the knowledge of how the seas operate, what lives in the sea, how to take care of the ocean, the tides. Like, I knew the tides when I was so little, when I was 2 and 3, I knew that. I got told that, and I just knew it. So, and I knew the changing, I knew what it looked like for the tides to change. Yeah. And I saw the animals in, like in the water, like the dolphins that swimming beside us, and all sorts of fish when we used to go, and the jellyfish. We used to have lots of jellyfish in the passage, and I used to think they were amazing. So just, I don't know, you have this appreciation and this fondness and love that starts from a very early age, that starts from a child, where you become connected to that. So it's a bit hard to explain, but it's like when you're connected to something very special, say, wherever you're from, connected to that country. Well, it's a bit like that with us. We're connected to the area in which our ancestors were and where we grew up. So yeah, it's very, very special. And SeaWeek is a prime example for me to talk about where I'm from and how we can look after, and how you can look after our oceans and seas and make it a clean, pristine, beautiful place for all the animals that live in there. Yeah. So yeah, so I hope that answers your question. And the resources of the shells, well, they all come from oysters. So we're going to get an oyster from the rocks where they grow, and then eat the oyster inside. And then we're going to grind. What they do is, you'll find a bit of sandstone, because sandstone here in Sydney there's a lot of sandstone around, because that's part of the geology here. And they grind the shell, grind this part here down on the sandstone, and they will probably have a specific sandstone to do that with. Grind it, and then they're going to break off, okay, whatever's left around the edges that would make a really good hook. But the thing is, you have different size hooks for different things. Yeah. So, and the same with your Malgon line, you're going to have a small line, like this, a fine line for something small. And then if you want to catch a bigger fish, we're going to have a thicker line. So it all depends on what you're going to be catching. Yeah. So so that's how I made that. And this, as I said, came from a Gymea lily. So Gymea lilies grow very, very tall. So perhaps, in your classroom, or you could ask your teacher to show you what a Gymea lily looks like. Yeah, if you don't know already. And you can see that the really long stem, when the lily the flower dies, this stem goes brown. And that's when we harvest the stem, and to make these. And you're not going to cut the flower when it's flowering, because when it's flowering, it attracts birds and bees, and it has a purpose. So when that flower dies and the stem dies, well, we will go and harvest that stem then. Yeah, so that we're not interfering with the nature, okay, of things, the general nature of things. And also, like we have when we go out to when the Aboriginal people, and from my place too, make canoes. They make canoes from the bark of a tree. And then perhaps you could have a look at some trees. Yeah, look at some trees online called scar trees. And some of those scar trees are quite large, the scars on the tree. So what the Aboriginal people do, and what my ancestors did to make a canoe, because I live by the water, of course, my ancestors made canoes. And then what they do is they take the bark off the tree, and the tree still keeps living. So they know how much they can cut into the tree without it dying, and the tree will continue to live. And there are trees up on Yidden and on Stradbroke Island, which is not far from us. That's our neighbours. There are scar trees there, and those scar trees show of where their ancestors had cut out either a canoe or a kulamon, a dish or a bowl out of the bark. Okay, but that tree would keep growing, and it's unsustainable to cut a tree down, because what happens is that all the animals that we need live in the trees. Yeah, all the animals that we hunt, like possum and a koala and birds, they all live in the trees. So we're not going to cut that tree down. And so canoes are made out of the bark, and so that's living sustainably. Yep, there's some more questions. Yes. How do eels give birth? Okay. Yeah. So I believe that they have eggs. There's not a lot known about them, but I believe that they have eggs. They have, like I said, 3 million eggs, and then those eggs hatch, and then the babies come out. Yeah. So.
How old were you when you first caught a fish?
Oh gosh. How old? Sorry, I keep forgetting. How old was I when I first caught a fish? I was really, really little. My dad had to help me. I didn't use this fishing line, of course. I used a normal fishing line, like the nylon lines. Okay, my ancestors used this. But oh gosh, I think I might have been about 4 or 5, something along those lines. I was out in the boat with my dad, and we always put out a line to catch fish. And my favourite fish used to be flathead. So around Yidden, flathead was, there was a lot of flathead then. So when we caught flathead, that was yummy in my tummy. So, so yeah, I was about 5-ish. I remember catching my fish and my dad having to help me pull it in. Yes. So I remember him having to put the bait on the hook for me because I didn't want to do that. Yeah. Well, I think he might have been more worried about me stabbing myself on the hook opposed to me having like a worm slime on my fingers. Why can't eels go backwards? That's just the way they're built. Yeah, that's just the way they're built. They cannot swim backwards. Same as sharks. Yep, sharks cannot swim backwards either. Yeah. So no, they cannot swim backwards. That's just physically impossible. Yeah.
Why are they called soldier crabs?
Soldier crabs. Why are soldier crabs called soldier crabs? Well, if you have a look at them on, if you see them they live in little colonies, and they sort of run. They're little blue crabs. They're little tiny, tiny blue crabs that burrow in. They burrow in the sand, and they all move together at the same time. It's like a little marching group. Yeah. So they're called soldier crabs. So have a look online, look up soldier crabs, and you can see they're really cute. Little tiny blue crabs that sort of run together, and they all move at the same time. They all bury themselves in the sand at the same time. They're really cute. Any other questions? Yeah, eels have a life cycle. Absolutely do. Do eels have a life cycle?
How does the hook attach to the fishing line?
Oh, okay. So how does the hook attach to the fishing line? Right, you would tie that. So what you would do with the hook, you would tie the fishing line to the end of the hook, and perhaps secure it with a bit of glue. The glue that we use is a combination of beeswax and kangaroo poo, believe it or not. So you would tie it, and then you attach it with beeswax and kangaroo poo to make sure that the shell hook would not come off. Now, in terms of the fishing, the eel life cycle, Liana's going to show the image, but the life cycle is the eel will swim up to the coral sea, and all the eels will come from everywhere. So they would it's like a mass spawning, but they would spawn, I think, with the eels that they know. Okay. And then there's not a lot of information about that, but yeah. So they would spawn up there, have their babies, and then the eel that spawned, the adult eel, would die. Okay, it wouldn't come back. But in the eel's lifetime, it can live up to 35 years old, and the females can spawn anywhere from 10 years old to 35. But they would only spawn once in their life. They would only have babies once in their life. And the same with the males. The males would only have babies once in their life. Yeah, so they would only make that journey once, and then their babies come back and they'd stay in the area where their parents came from until they were ready to make that journey as well. And like I said, Pacific, they would come from the Pacific Islands. They would come as far from Tasmania, New Zealand. So the short fin eel came from many different places. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, I answer a few more questions. How long have I got, Liana? Okay, so I've got 5 more minutes, so I'm going to answer some of your questions. It's fine. Do eels have natural predators? Absolutely. Just about everything want to eat it, including us. Yeah. So that's why when they're babies, they're clear, because it's a form of camouflage and protection for them to get back to their home. And so not a lot of them make it. So bigger fish will eat them. Even probably their journey up to the coral sea, I'm sure a lot of them would have gotten eaten by other bigger fish. Yeah. So fish probably like sharks or bigger pelagic fish. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, even big birds. Liana said even birds would eat them as well. So if they're swimming close to the surface, you would get the water birds come down, and the sea eagles would come and grab them as well. Yeah. So they had lots of different predators, absolutely did. And I guess by having 3 million eggs, each female, would ensure that species would most definitely live on. Yeah. So anything else? What do eels like to eat? That's a really good question. I think they will probably so when we have the eels come in here, they like to chase little tiny fish, because here in this environment, it's what we call a fish nursery. So bigger fish come and lay their eggs in here or give birth to their baby fish, and they stay in the little shallow waterways and around the mangroves to be safe. Yeah, around the mangrove roots and stuff. So the eels, when the tide comes in, the eels will come in and say thank you very much, and they will most definitely chase those baby fish. So baby fish were most definitely on the menu for the eels. Yes. One last question from everybody. How long after having their babies does it take the eel to die? I really can't answer that question. Okay, that's a very, very concise question, but it's a really good one. And I don't think a lot of information is out there to say that, but I believe it's not long after. Yeah, not long after they give birth, they've used all their energy to swim up there, to have their babies, and then I think not long after they'll just swim away and die. Yeah. So that was my last question. So I'd like to thank everybody. Hopefully it sort of enlightened you a little bit about Aboriginal culture and how we look at the sea and the ocean, and how we have a belief that it is a living entity and it is part of us, it's part of me. Yeah, so and I am part of it. So we have this merging, and then the dolphins are my family. So they're ocean dwelling creature, but they are my family. So please do something to look after the oceans. If you're ever by the ocean or you're ever by the sea or even a river, make sure you leave nothing behind, yeah? And take memories with you and leave nothing but footprints. So I'd like to say goodbye and thank you, and enjoy the rest of SeaWeek.
Thank you so much, Aunty Kim, for sharing all of those amazing stories and the great questions we had from all the participants as well. Being able to, to understand that connection to country and the connection to ocean, I think is so important during SeaWeek, and really appreciate you joining us this afternoon. So a big thank you to you and to everyone for participating in SeaWeek, and hopefully we'll see you in some of our other sessions.
Thank you. And yeah, I'd just like to thank Liana as well. So Liana's been my helper today. She's my partner in crime. We always do this together. She's always behind the scenes. I like to show her, say that someone does help me.
Well, she makes it easy to give you hand over everything that you need when you need it. So thank
Absolutely.
you. And to everyone that joined us today, have a great afternoon, and we'll see you again later in SeaWeek. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye.